I should have turned back the moment the last light slipped from the sky. The forest around me had transformed in the blink of an eye. What had been a vibrant, lively place under the sun's warmth had become a labyrinth of shadows and silence. The trail I had followed so confidently was gone, swallowed by the creeping dark. I spun slowly in place, scanning the endless wall of pine trunks stretching in every direction, their branches knit so tightly above my head that not a single star or sliver of the moon could pierce through. I told myself not to panic, to retrace my steps, but every tree looked the same now. Tall, ancient, unmoving sentinels guarding secrets older than I could imagine. I clutched my jacket tighter around me as a chill settled into my bones. Somewhere, a branch snapped, a sharp, clean sound that cut through the oppressive stillness like a knife. I froze, listening, but the forest returned to silence so complete it seemed to press against my ears. I forced myself to move, picking a direction and walking carefully, but after only a few steps, the certainty that I was going the wrong way gnawed at my gut. Doubt became fear, and fear grew faster than I could control it. I stopped again, heart thudding heavily in my chest, and tried to focus. Maybe if I stayed put, my friends would realize I was missing and come looking for me. Maybe they were already searching. I hugged myself against the creeping cold and tried not to imagine the long night stretching ahead. That's when I heard it. A voice, faint and lilting, drifting through the trees. It carried my name, as soft as a breath against my ear. Nina. My heart jumped. Relief flooded me so quickly I nearly stumbled. I wasn't alone. Someone had found me. "Hello?" I called out, my voice cracking with the effort to sound brave. No answer came, but after a moment, I heard it again. My name, floating on the wind, a little stronger this time. I turned toward the sound without thinking, stepping carefully over roots and fallen branches, my hope drowning out the tiny voice of warning that tried to whisper in the back of my mind. The cold deepened, and with it came a strange sense of being watched, but I told myself it was only nerves. The forest was vast, yes, but I wasn't far from camp. Surely my friends must have realized I was missing by now. Surely they were close. I moved faster, calling out again. "Is someone there?" The voice responded with a soft giggle just beyond the next stand of trees. It sounded almost playful. I hesitated, the hairs on the back of my neck rising, but the thought of standing alone in the dark, of doing nothing, was worse. I pushed forward, my footsteps muffled by the thick layer of pine needles carpeting the forest floor. Every shadow seemed to stretch toward me, as if eager to pull me deeper into the woods. Still, I moved toward the voice, desperate for the warmth and safety of another human presence. As I stepped over a particularly large root, something in the corner of my vision flickered. I turned sharply, and there, through the dense trees, I caught sight of it. A soft, golden glow bobbing gently in the dark. A lantern. Someone was carrying a lantern. Relief broke over me like a wave, so intense it left me dizzy. Without thinking, I called out again, louder this time. "I'm here!" The lantern bobbed once, almost as if in acknowledgement, then began to move deeper into the woods. I didn't even hesitate. I set off after it, weaving through the trees, hope burning so brightly in my chest that I barely noticed the subtle wrongness creeping into the air around me. At that moment, all I knew was that I wasn't alone anymore. Someone had found me. I wasn't lost. Not really. Not yet. "Hello?" I called again, my voice cracking against the thick wall of trees. For a moment there was only silence, so dense it felt like it might swallow my words whole. I strained my ears, desperate, the cold gnawing deeper into my skin, making me shiver. Then, faint but unmistakable, the voice answered. My name, carried gently through the trees, like a lullaby meant for no one else but me. Nina ... Hope flared so bright in my chest that it burned away the edges of my fear. Someone was out there. Someone who knew my name. Maybe it was Aaron or Josh. Maybe they realized I hadn't made it back to camp and were looking for me. I pushed forward, heart pounding, stumbling over hidden roots and slipping on the moss-slick forest floor. The trees seemed to lean closer with every step, their skeletal fingers clawing at my sleeves, snagging my hair. Still, I called out, "I'm here! Keep talking so I can find you!" Another giggle, high and lilting, answered me. It wasn't quite a laugh, not exactly. It was softer, lighter, almost teasing. I told myself it was just someone trying to lighten the mood, trying to keep me calm, but a tiny sliver of unease wormed its way under my ribs. The voice didn't sound quite right. It sounded too sweet, too airy, as if it floated above the earth instead of belonging to a real, breathing body. Still, I chased it. I didn't know what else to do. The forest had already closed in behind me. Going back wasn't an option anymore. The voice drifted ahead, always just beyond reach, playful and elusive. Every time I thought I was getting closer, it would pull back, leading me deeper and deeper between the gnarled trunks and thickets. My calls grew more frantic. Each breath I drew felt thinner, colder, as if the forest itself were draining the warmth from my lungs. "Nina," the voice sang again, closer now, closer than before. A shadow darted between the trees up ahead, quick and flickering, like a figure slipping out of sight. I hurried after it, driven more by fear of being left behind than by any real logic. The oppressive silence folded back in after every whisper, leaving me alone with the heavy thud of my own footsteps. I told myself not to be afraid. I told myself I wasn't being led astray. I told myself anything I had to just to keep moving. Then, through the dense maze of trunks, I saw it. A warm, golden glow bobbing gently among the shadows. A lantern. Relief nearly knocked me to my knees. I wasn't imagining it. Someone really was there. "Wait! I'm coming!" I cried, stumbling forward, nearly slipping as I navigated the uneven ground. The light floated ahead, steady and inviting, casting a small, flickering circle of safety in the smothering darkness. I could just make out the silhouette of a small figure holding it, half obscured by the branches. The figure turned slightly, the lantern swinging as if beckoning me to follow. And I did, without hesitation, without thought. I followed the light deeper into the waiting woods, leaving behind the last fragile thread of common sense that might have told me to stop. Because in that moment, I believed with all my heart that the light was my salvation. That if I could just catch up, everything would be okay. I didn't notice the way the trees grew even denser. I didn't notice how the night air grew sharper, almost metallic against my tongue. I didn't even notice the first faint whiff of rot that drifted past my nose. All I saw, all I cared about, was the lantern's glow ahead of me, swinging gently like a promise I was desperate to believe. The lantern's glow danced between the trees, bobbing gently, as if carried by an unseen hand. I stumbled after it, heart hammering against my ribs, desperate to keep it within sight. The air around me grew colder with every step, and the forest began to feel wrong somehow, like a dream where everything looked familiar, but none of it made sense. Still, I pushed on, forcing myself to believe that the light was leading me back to camp, that it was my lifeline through the dark. Branches clawed at my clothes, scratching my arms and snagging my hair, but I hardly noticed. All that mattered was the lantern, swaying gently just ahead. The deeper I moved into the woods, the more the night seemed to thicken around me. The comforting scent of pine that had always reminded me of crisp air and campfires was gone, replaced by a cloying, sickly sweet odor that made my stomach churn. It was the smell of something old, something dead. I slowed for the first time, hesitating as dread prickled at the base of my spine. The sensible part of my mind screamed at me to stop, to turn back, to trust the unease knotting tighter in my gut. But the lantern floated on, so warm, so golden against the consuming darkness. And so I moved forward again, each step feeling heavier, as if the forest floor were trying to hold me in place. The trees crowded closer, their thick, rough trunks forming narrow corridors that forced me to squeeze through sideways. The deeper I went, the more the landscape twisted, no longer matching the forest I had entered hours before. The ground beneath my boots turned soft and spongy, giving slightly with every footfall as if covering something rotten just beneath the surface. I didn't want to think about it. I focused only on the light, only on getting closer. I called out again, "Wait!" please. But no answer came. Just the soft creak of branches high above me, and the whisper of the wind slithering through the trees. The light seemed to speed up, darting quicker between the pines, and I broke into a jog to keep pace, my breath coming faster in the frigid air. A creeping numbness spread through my fingers and toes. It felt colder than it should have been for early fall, colder than the night could explain. My legs burned, my lungs ached, but I didn't dare stop. I didn't dare lose sight of that light. Somewhere in the back of my mind, a voice, my own voice, whispered that I was being led somewhere I shouldn't go, that this wasn't a rescue, that I was chasing a lure. I shoved the thought away. I had to believe it was someone trying to help. I had to. But just as I felt I was finally gaining on it, just as the lantern's warm glow filled my vision, the light sputtered. For a heartbeat it flickered wildly, shadows thrashing across the forest floor. And then, without warning, it went out. The darkness slammed into me, complete and suffocating, so sudden it stole the air from my lungs. I froze, gasping, blinking rapidly as if my eyes could force the light back. "Wait!" I cried into the black, the words swallowed by the thick trees. Silence answered me. The crushing realization hit like a blow. I was alone. Truly, horribly alone. My hands trembled as I reached out blindly, touching nothing but empty, frozen air. A heavy dread settled into my chest, and the first true sliver of terror cut through me. Not the anxious fear of being lost, not the nervous fear of being alone in the woods. This was something colder, deeper, a primal certainty that I had just crossed an invisible line, and there was no going back. I opened my mouth to call out again, but before I could, a whisper brushed against my ear. Close. Too close. I jerked around, heart hammering so violently it hurt. And there, standing in the darkness just a breath away, was a shape. Small. Still. Holding something faint and familiar in its hand. A dark, extinguished lantern. I barely had time to suck in a breath before the whisper brushed against my ear again. Closer this time. Almost like a sigh stirring the tiny hairs on the back of my neck. I spun around so fast I nearly fell, my boots skidding across the damp forest floor. And there he was, a boy, no older than 10, standing barely a foot away from me. He wore clothes that looked wrong for the world I knew. Woolen trousers held up by suspenders, a white shirt stained with old dirt, and scuffed leather boots that looked like they belonged in a century long gone. His hands, small and pale, clutched the same lantern whose light had lured me so far from the trail. But it was extinguished now, an empty, dead thing in the gloom. He stood perfectly still, head tilted slightly to one side, as if studying me. The dim light from the overcast sky above filtered down just enough to reveal his face. And that's when the true horror settled in. His eyes were milky white, not in the way of cataracts or blindness, but blank, gleaming and empty like twin moons. And his mouth, God, his mouth, stretched into a grin far too wide for his face, splitting it unnaturally from cheek to cheek. The same lilting giggle I had been chasing now bubbled up from his throat, but hearing it come from such a twisted, frozen figure made my skin crawl so violently I nearly retched. My mind screamed at me to move, to run, to do something, but terror had sunk its claws deep into my muscles, pinning me where I stood. Every instinct I had, every shred of reason, was shouting that this thing wasn't human, that it never had been, that I had been following something else entirely. The boy took a single step forward, and I flinched back instinctively. The forest seemed to lean in closer around us, the thick scent of rot growing stronger, making the air almost too heavy to breathe. For a heartbeat, neither of us moved. Then, slowly, so slowly it made my stomach twist, the boy opened his mouth even wider, a low, rattling hiss escaping from the dark hollow of his throat. And I saw it. His edges flickered, blurred, as if he wasn't fully there, like smoke barely clinging to a shape. Through the trembling outline of his body, I glimpsed the dark trees behind him, their shapes warping and swimming as if seen through heat waves. I stumbled back a step, my heel catching on a root. I barely kept from falling, gasping for breath, every nerve in my body screaming now. The boy's smile vanished in an instant, replaced by something far, far worse. His face twisted, the pale skin around his eyes and mouth pulling taut, distorting into an expression of pure, incandescent rage. An icy wind whipped suddenly through the trees, battering me with the stink of earth and decay, tearing at my hair and clothes. The boy's figure shimmered and blurred again, but now it seemed to stretch, to grow taller, darker, more monstrous. That was enough. Terror finally shattered the frozen grip on my legs. I turned and ran, not caring where I was going, not caring about the branches tearing at my arms or the roots clawing at my ankles. Behind me, the boy's giggle rose once more. But this time it twisted into a shriek so high and sharp it felt like it might rip the very air apart. The sound chased me into the blackness between the trees, and somewhere deep inside, I knew that no matter how fast I ran, the boy would never be far behind. The world around me blurred into a frenzy of darkness and biting cold as I tore through the forest, the boy's shrill, broken laughter echoing from the trees behind me. I didn't dare look back. Every instinct screamed to keep running, to put as much distance as I could between myself and that thing wearing a child's face. Branches whipped at my cheeks and arms, stinging and slicing, but I barely felt them. The only thing that mattered was escape. The ground dipped and twisted beneath me, as if the very forest itself was trying to trip me, to hold me here in its ancient grip. But I kept going, heart pounding painfully, breath coming in shallow, ragged gasps. The boy's giggles faded, only to spring up again ahead of me. To the side, above, below, everywhere at once. It was like the forest had swallowed me whole, and now it was playing with me. The cold deepened, a seeping, unnatural chill that gnawed at my bones and filled my chest with ice. The trees themselves seemed different now, thicker, gnarled, their bark blackened as if burned, their branches curled like claws. Shadows twisted unnaturally between them, shifting even when the wind didn't blow. I stumbled to a halt, gasping, blinking rapidly against the swirling mist that had begun to curl along the forest floor. And that's when I saw him again, just a few feet ahead, standing motionless between two skeletal trees. The boy. The extinguished lantern still hung from his pale fingers, swinging slightly, though there was no breeze. But it was his body that made the scream catch and die in my throat. He wasn't solid anymore. His form flickered and rippled, like a reflection in disturbed water. Through his translucent skin, I could see the twisted trees behind him, distorted and shifting through his chest, his arms, his hollow eyes. A gust of icy wind blasted through the clearing, carrying with it the stench of damp earth and something fouler, something that smelled like rot and decay left too long under the sun. I clamped a hand over my mouth, gagging. The boy's wide, grotesque grin faltered. His face twisted and spasmed, the grin stretching even further until it cracked, splitting the corners of his mouth into deep, bleeding fissures. The milky whites of his eyes darkened, swirling with smoky shadows that bled out and tainted the mist curling at his feet. I stumbled back a step, heart slamming so hard against my ribs that I thought it might burst. He opened his mouth then, not to speak, but to unleash a sound so jagged, so monstrous, it didn't even seem to belong to a human throat. It was a shriek, raw and piercing, a sound that vibrated in the very marrow of my bones. The trees around us seemed to respond, groaning and shifting, leaning inward, as if the entire forest were collapsing around me. That was when the last fragile thread of terror that had kept me frozen snapped. I turned and ran, lungs burning, legs shaking, my only thought to get away, to escape this nightmare that had been hiding just beneath the surface of the woods. The laughter changed now, growing sharper, crueler, rising and falling as if in some sick game of chase. The forest twisted and morphed around me, paths that should have been there vanishing, new ones opening where there had been nothing before. It was as if the very woods were alive, reshaping themselves to keep me trapped inside. I didn't care anymore where I was going. I didn't care that every step took me deeper into the unknown. All that mattered was that I kept moving, kept running, kept fighting the terror that clawed at the edges of my mind, threatening to drag me down. Somewhere behind me, the boy shrieked again, a sound of pure, seething hatred. The icy mist thickened, swirling around my ankles, rising higher with every desperate step. I had to get away. I had to. I didn't know how long I had been running anymore. Minutes. Hours. It all blurred into a single endless moment of panic and cold, and the unrelenting sound of laughter clawing at my ears. The boy's shrieks had lost any human quality they once had. Now a distorted, piercing wail that rose and fell in the darkness, chasing me through the twisting forest. I didn't dare look back. I could feel him there, just behind me. His footsteps, or whatever they were, silent but sure, gaining ground no matter how fast or how blindly I ran. The forest was alive now, alive in a way that defied every law of nature. Trees seemed to shift when I wasn't looking, their thick trunks squeezing tighter together to block paths that moments before had been clear. Twisting roots rose from the earth like grasping hands, tripping me, scraping my knees and palms as I stumbled and scrambled forward. The mist was everywhere now, swirling higher, thicker, clinging to me with wet fingers, wrapping around my legs like shackles. My lungs burned with every gasp of the frigid, rotten air, and my muscles screamed for relief, but terror drove me forward. A branch lashed across my face, and the sharp sting of it briefly cut through the fog of panic. I tasted blood on my tongue, but kept running, ignoring the pain, ignoring everything except the desperate need to escape. Behind me, I heard it again, that giggle, that sickening sound that no child should ever make. Closer. So close I could almost feel icy breath against the back of my neck. My heart hammered against my ribs so violently it felt like it might break through my chest. I shoved past a thick clump of bushes, thorns tearing at my jacket, and found myself in a clearing, a space wider, flatter, the trees pulling back just slightly. For one fragile, foolish moment, hope sparked in me again. Maybe I could lose him here. Maybe if I just kept running, kept pushing forward, I could find my way back to camp, to safety, to something human and real. But the moment I set foot in the clearing, the mist shifted, thickened, and the ground beneath my boots felt unstable, almost loose. Still, I pressed on, running faster, not daring to slow down. The boy's laughter grew louder, sharper, no longer behind me but all around, bouncing off the trees in a nightmarish echo. Everywhere I turned, it was there, circling, mocking, chasing. I could almost hear the rustle of his old-fashioned clothes brushing against the branches, the soft thud of his feet on the earth, light and quick and unstoppable. Something cold brushed against my back, a fleeting touch, like a hand or a claw, and I screamed, a raw, broken sound torn from my throat. I didn't look. I couldn't. I just ran faster, driven by a fear so pure it overpowered thought, reason, everything. My boots slipped on the loose earth beneath me, but I kept my footing, plunging ahead into the mist, deeper into the shifting, treacherous forest. I didn't see the ground drop away in front of me. Not until it was too late. There was no warning, no time to stop. One moment, I was sprinting full tilt, my chest burning, my legs pumping. And the next, the earth vanished from beneath my feet. With a strangled cry, I pitched forward into nothingness, the world tilting wildly around me. I flailed uselessly, grabbing for anything, but there was only open air and the shrieking laughter still ringing in my ears. The last thing I saw before darkness swallowed me was the jagged, crumbling edge of the ravine, already far above my head, disappearing into the mist. The world tipped violently around me as I plunged into open air, the forest floor vanishing above my head in a blur of black and gray. For a fleeting second, everything seemed weightless, soundless, almost peaceful. And then gravity took hold, yanking me downward with brutal force. I hit something hard, a ledge, a thick branch, and pain exploded through my side, knocking the air from my lungs. Before I could grasp at anything, the ground gave way again, and I tumbled further, branches and roots slashing at my arms, my face, tearing my clothes, clawing for purchase that never came. The wind roared in my ears, or maybe it was my own panicked breathing, ragged and desperate, the scream trapped somewhere deep inside my chest. I twisted mid-fall, reaching out blindly, my fingers grazing rough bark once, twice, never enough to catch hold. Every frantic thought fractured into chaos. This isn't happening. This isn't real. I have to wake up. I have to... The darkness thickened around me, the cold slicing deeper than any branch or root could. It felt like falling through ice, through emptiness, through the very bones of the earth itself. I slammed into another ledge, the impact jarring every bone in my body, stars bursting behind my eyes. I crumpled and rolled, and still the earth dragged me further down, tumbling into the unseen depths. Somewhere high above, lost behind layers of mist and broken trees, I thought I heard it again. The faint, ghostly giggle, echoing through the ravine walls like a song meant only for the dead. My vision blurred, and my limbs grew heavy, too heavy to move. Every breath came slower now, each one more painful than the last, the cold closing in, pressing down until even the thought of struggle faded. I knew dimly that I was not going to climb out of this place. I knew that I was going to be another whisper among the trees, another story told in hushed voices around campfires. The boy's face flashed behind my eyes, those blank, milky orbs, that rictus grin, and the final bone-deep realization settled over me. I hadn't been lost. I had been led. Led exactly where he wanted me. The last thing I felt was the sharp snap of a root tangling around my ankle, a final cruel tug from the forest itself. And then, mercifully, the world dissolved into black. Morning came. A pale light filtered weakly through the towering pines, illuminating nothing but a scattered trail of footprints that led to the broken, crumbling edge of the ravine, and nowhere beyond. The forest stood silent and still, as if it had never been disturbed. High above, in the cold dawn air, a faint giggle drifted between the trees, followed by the brief flickering glow of a lantern swinging gently in the mist, searching for the next soul to follow it into the dark.